All right, hi everyone. I'm going to do a session on, sort of boots on the ground or day in the life of DevRel. So doing DevRel for Hedera, and there's a task, or I should say a mega task or an epic with lots of subtasks that I'm scoping and planning out right now. And so I thought I would record myself in the process of doing it so that you can follow along how I go about this activity. All right. So this activity is to do with documentation or restructuring documentation, I should say more specifically. And so here's the introduction to the task, right? So this is the Hedera docs, right? So docs.hedera.com, and this is the landing page, and you've got all this stuff. Now you can click on getting started, and then that will take you through an introduction where you have the faucet, which is one way to get funds, and then you can also have the portal, which is another way to get funds. Then set up using a .env file where you stick your private key, etc. inside of, and then some code to operate it. Then you create an account by transferring or creating an account, create transaction, etc. And then you have transferring HBAR, and then you can query the balance of what you transferred. So that's currently what's inside the Getting Started guide. And then over and above that, we also have a tutorial section which has Hello World, right? And so what this covers is quite a bit of an overlap, right? So there's create and fund account, which is over here, right? And then after that, one for each of the services. Now, the services part doesn't really overlap with the Getting Started part. It only really overlaps in the fact that it uses the SDK, but that's not a very big overlap. Now, the create and fund account, right? It doesn't do all the steps within Getting Started, but it still uses the faucet. You still create an account. You still do a transfer. So and you still query the account balance. So that's kind of I guess causing some confusion, and it's not just our own guess, right? There has been some feedback from the community of developers working on Hedera, right? So there was some in-person feedback from ETH Denver. There were also survey respondents as well, filling out the surveys that we send out to developers every so often. And then there was also some enterprise feedback that came in through management channels. So there's a through line through all of these, and one of the through lines is that this Hello World and Getting Started. Where do you actually start when you want to, and when you want to work on it, right? So this is the task, the thing that needs to be solved. And so I've been working together with the docs team to come up with a plan, right? And then, obviously follow up with executing that plan. So before we sort of get started on that, right, which is essentially how do we get this Hello World and Getting Started into sort of merged into the same thing, and so there's only one thing to do. I wanted to take a step back and talk about developers, right? And specifically developer journeys. So I tweeted this out recently. So dev journeys are always represented, or typically represented in a linear format. So you got discover, evaluate, learn, build, scale, and those are typically done as columns in a table, right? And then all the activities are the cells in the table, right? Now that's great from a theoretical point of view, but as I say here, but in reality, developers will go through those different activities, right? All these different materials, they'll bounce back and forth, Right, this is a bigger version of the image. So for example, you start off at the landing page in Discover, and then maybe you get all the way through here, and then you decide to start building, right? And then you start using reference materials, etc., right? Or maybe you do something else instead, where you continue on your discovery stage, and then after that you continue on to evaluation, and you follow these activities, and then eventually you start building, right? So these are various paths that developers can go along, and sometimes they can even go backwards and loop around, etc. So it's not my point is that it's not a linear thing. So coming back to this, what we wanted to do was to rearrange or refactor this getting started section such that it would incorporate the hello world, and right, that's just one of the requirements. The second thing that we wanted to get done was to have developer journeys, and specifically to have one per learning path that is defined by a segment. So let's say you have identified multiple segments, right, which we have, and then we want to have one developer journey per segment. But that doesn't mean that you need one learning path per segment as well. In fact, that might be overkill. So initially, you'll just have one learning path, and then after that, we'll expand that to multiple. And some developer segments or personas will share a common learning path where they overlap significantly. So that's the idea. So the getting started is going to be it's going to be restructured like that. So let's get a bit concrete. So let's see, I'm just going to open up a new file and close this, and let's see, change this to Markdown. All right. So right now what we have is getting started, and then that has intro, environment, I'll just call it .env, more specifically, it's query balance, right? And then you also have tutorials, and then underneath tutorials we have hello world, and then underneath hello world, and you know there are more tutorials obviously, so I'll just not so relevant for here, so we'll leave it out. So create and fund account, and then one for each of the services. Right, and so this is what we have at the moment, and what we want to get to is basically this, right? So getting started, and it will have intro, and then a quick start, right? And what will quick start actually be? It'll be this. And then after that, we'll have hello world, right? And then we'll have all of these. So basically, one of the hello worlds will go into quick start and replace all of these 4 items. And then the other hello worlds will just sort of come in underneath that into hello world. And then after that, you have learning paths, right? And we haven't decided exactly what this should be named, but this is a working name. So for now, we'll use learning paths, and then we'll have persona 1 learning path, and then persona 2 learning path, and so on, right? Persona 3. But that's, let's make that a bit more concrete. So let's say we call this EVM developer path, right? And then under this, maybe we'll have a Web2 developer path. Right? I'm just not giving concrete ones yet. These are not the exact personas, etc. And then persona 3 path over here, and then we can replace that with whatever we want. So this is new structure. So existing structure, new structure. And just to be clear, there are more items in the navigation which we do not care about at the moment. So this will all be in getting started, not split between getting started and tutorials, which will remove the confusion. So this is the rearrangement that we're looking at. Now, let's see. So the next thing that I want to do is to identify what should be in each of these learning journeys. And so I wanted to sort of talk about the types of docs that you see in documentation sites, right? So you can have reference docs. You can also have content docs. These are, I guess, the more fairly obvious ones. And then finally, you can have directory docs, right? Which maybe requires a bit more explanation. So reference docs, right? The example is APIs, right? So if you have a SDK, for example, or a REST API, then exactly how you call the functions or how you hit the HTTP endpoints and what the expected return responses are, what the errors are, etc. This is detailed granular information at the code level, but you published it in a website of some sort. So that's reference documentation, right? Then the next thing is content, right? So this is mostly going to be tutorials, right? So step-by-step guides that say do this, then do that, then do that, right? So this is a type of content that is distinct from reference. So reference is just granular details, but doesn't really tie anything together. Whereas content is a mix of those hand-selected or curated reference documentation for this specific function, that specific API, from perhaps two different areas, like maybe you're mixing an SDK call with an API call, and then you're smushing them together and you create a tutorial, right? And then there's some description and some explanation, etc. So I call that content documentation. And the final one is a bit more abstract, right? And so these are basically saying it's links, right? A list of links. And an example of that would be the landing page, right? So this is an example, right? This hello world sequence here. This is an example of a content documentation where it's giving you step by step. It's giving you some technical information, some explanations, etc., right? So that's what it's doing, right? Now, if you contrast that with, say, the landing page, the main landing page, welcome to Header, this one, right? So this is more of a directory page. So you can see links, predominantly links, right? So there's very little description, but it's mostly saying, hey, if you want to do X, here's the link, and it'll direct you to some sub-page within somewhere else within the docs. And this is your directory type of documentation. Now, let's see if I can find, core concepts, right? So, core concepts, this is something more like reference documentation. So this is not exactly API specifications. This is more but detailed descriptions of certain things, right? Yeah. And I think there's another one that SDKs, right? So there's an SDK. So this is API documentation. This would be a really good one to look at. Another one to look at would be the REST API. And so this over here, let's say we go to the testnet, Swagger UI. So these are interactive documentation, right? And so I would consider this to be reference documentation. So coming back to this, so we've got three different types of documentation. I'm just sort of define them or categorize them into three broad categories. Now, what are we really trying to do here, right? So for getting started, the introduction should be content, right? For quick start, that should also be content. And for the hello worlds, right, they should all be content as well themselves. However, for learning paths, they're really directory type content, right? And it's okay that we don't have the reference type, because I don't think the reference type of material belongs in getting started. Where it would be appropriate for the reference to materials to exist would be elsewhere. For example, you know, in the rest of the documentation, and then these content pages within the docs and the directory pages within the docs, they potentially, or as appropriate, they should link to the reference materials. Yeah, so that's the plan. Okay, continuing on, the next thing to do here is to plan all of the tasks, right? And so roughly the process that I'm going to follow is identify tasks, then split tasks between teams. So specifically in this case, the DevRel team and the docs team. So, you know, there's roles and responsibilities. You could do a RACI matrix if you want to have a more complex stakeholder structure in this. And that's fine, maybe for later stages to be determined. But for now, it's like there's just going to be two parties that are responsible, the DevRel team and the docs team, and we'll just keep it simple that way. Yep. Okay, so then break into stages. So this is important because each of the people working on the task can only work on one task concurrently, at least to be effective. And so the different teams can work concurrently, but then there's prerequisites and post-requisites for each of the tasks. So you need to make sure that they line up properly. And you could go full-on Gantt chart with this, but I feel that the complexity level of this project doesn't really warrant that. And, you know, just breaking them up to stages is sufficient. Then move the task, right, into the stages, right? So the tasks have been split between teams, and then now we have stages, we put them into stages as well. And then decide which ones to shift later, right? So in doing these things, there's some sort of prioritization that will be inherent when you start putting tasks into stages. Maybe we should have another stage at the end where we push or more stuff later so that we can front load some of the important stuff or the high priority stuff earlier on, etc. Right? Yeah, and then once that has happened, create a ticket, right? Which in this case will take the form of a GitHub issue. In this case, I've kind of done it a little bit backwards. I've already created a GitHub issue. We'll see that later. But for now, we're not going to create a brand new ticket, but rather update an existing one, since, you know, we have an existing one. Okay, so let's get started with this one, right? So let me see. So I'm just planning this. So the first thing is where we started on, which is navigation structure. So planning that out, kind of already done that, but, you know, there will be more details that we need to figure out. And then write the intro page. And let's see, after writing the intro page, I think update the docs to merge or move pages from tutorial/hello world, and we can break that down further, and then there'll be create demo repos. Actually, I should say that code repos on GitHub. Then we have update docs for new languages. Yes, I forgot to mention this earlier on, right? So one of the things with getting started is that these 4 pages over here, their instructions are available in multiple languages, right? Specifically, so not the introduction, not in the environment setup, actually in the environment setup. So you've got Java, you've got JavaScript, and you've got Go. So 3 different languages, 3 different programming languages. There's a 4th one, Swift as well, but that's missing from this tutorial. It's a more recent SDK, so this needs to be updated, or should be updated, but there won't be a need to because of this refactor, and then post refactor we can add the Swift SDK into that one. Right, so there's Java, JavaScript, Go, and so you can see how they have tabs for each one with the code examples. Now, if you contrast that with, say, Hello World, right, so this create and fund account thing is the equivalent of these 4 combined, then you can see over here that the code examples, right, they're just JavaScript. There's no multiple tabs, there's no Java version, there's no Golang version. So that's one of the things that needs to be addressed before going to getting started. And so we'll talk about the order of that as well, because we don't want to merge things and then take away multiple language support. Rather, we want to merge things and have the multiple language support ready in time for that to be done. All right, so update documentation for new languages, and then update docs for new languages, and then record demo videos for new languages. All right, and what else do we have? Say this is currently called migrate /refactor. And then write learning paths. Okay, so this is the high level tasks. I think I'm gonna break those down. Bullet points for intro page, right, intro page. I think this one needs to move down to here. So at minimum, we need the new languages and in the code repos, and we also need to update the docs for the new languages, and then we can refactor and migrate. But the demo videos for the new languages can probably come after, right? This is the more high priority thing to get done. And so if this can come after, it should come after. And let's see, learning paths, come back to that. Okay, so yeah, let's break that down. For Java and Golang and Swift, and then same thing for Java, Golang, and Swift. And then for videos, same thing. Java, Golang, Swift. All right, and then I think what's going to happen next? I think that we can group this because the existing documentation under getting started, it doesn't have Swift, it has the 3 SDK languages, so we aren't going backwards if we don't migrate Swift yet. So I'm gonna do all the Swift stuff at the end. Right, so high level shuffling of tasks to get them into the right order. And I think this is roughly it, right? Okay, so now let's get them into stages and also assign them who does what, right? So let's start with stage 1. I think docs team, and docs team, right? Actually, maybe DevRel should have some input in that. So DevRel team and the docs team work together on that. And then I think simultaneously you can create the code repos on GitHub for Java. And keep in mind that each Hello World sequence has 5 things, not just the create and fund account, right? So that actually would be 5 subtasks, right? But I'm not going to sort of expand that out into like that many bullet points, because then we'll get a lot of clutter, right? We're just doing high level planning on the stage. So stage 2, I think, right, would be to update the docs. I think, hang on, let me just, so this would be obviously DevRel, and this would be DevRel as well. Update docs for Java is DevRel, update docs for Golang is Java, and this would be the docs team. And I think there would be one new task, right? So page structuring decisions. And what I mean by that is maybe this pattern of using tabs would work for the Hello World sequences when they're migrated in, but that's not a guarantee. It may very well be insufficient, and instead of that we might have like subpages instead of the same page with tabs within it. So that's what I mean by page structuring decision for docs with multiple languages. Tabs, single page versus multiple sub pages. All right, then I think that will bring us to stage 3, where it's actually ready to do the migration. And let's split that up. So migrate refactor docs to move pages from tutorials Hello World / create fund account to getting started / quick start, right? And then tutorial / hello world and the rest of it to hello-world / start, right? And so that would be the main lift for stage 3, the migration. And then I think DevRel, right, having the expertise on the personas, is determine select learning paths based on segments and personas, and then write DevRel, write the learning path. All right, so that brings us to stage 4. I think this one is pretty straightforward. DevRel record demo videos for Java, DevRel record demo videos for Golang. Right, so this is covered already, I think it was a repeat. And then finally, the stuff that we've shunted all the way to the back, right? Which is anything to do with Swift, right? Because of the reasons mentioned earlier on. All right, so this is the plan, 5 stages, right? Stage 1, 2, 3. And I guess the overarching thing is that coming back to the impetus, right? Why this is being done, to reduce confusion. Stage 3, where this migration effort happens, that is the key thing that needs to happen, right? And so we want to front load that as much as possible. So everything in here is absolutely a prerequisite to this happening. And so that's why we put that in stage 1 and 2. And then we split stage 1 and 2 up, mainly because we can't do this stuff without the stuff having been done before it, right? So that's the reason for stage 1 and 2 being split that way. And then stage 3 is where we get like a positive outcome, right? And then I'll characterize stage 1 and 3 as sort of cancellation of negative effects, and then stage 4 and 5 is, you know, additional positive effects, right? So we're improving, but improving in different ways. All right, so that's the planning. All right, so then the final thing I want to do is to create a ticket, right? And in this case, as mentioned earlier on, we won't be creating a new ticket, but rather using an existing one. So I'm just going to go to GitHub. Actually, let me bring that tab in here. And where were we? Okay, so in Hedera dev, I think actually it was hashgraph. Right? So hashgraph, Hedera docs, there we go. So, in this repo, I've created an issue already, as mentioned earlier on. Okay. So here we go. So this was the original plan. At least when I was first thinking of it, and you can see it's not as comprehensive because it basically covers these 2 points, these 2 points, and these 2 points, plus these 3 points, right? That's effectively what it covers, right? And then it's kind of like doesn't fail to take into account the bigger picture. So what I'm going to do is edit this and essentially copy all the stages. Task planning. I'm just going to put the stages in there. And so I'm going to put in some stuff around additional notes. So there's no Swift in the current getting started, so that can be stages. Consider tasks related to navigation restructure. And consider tasks related to, apart from navigation structure, it would be learning paths. All right. And see if I missed anything. I think that should do it. All right, so update comment. So pretty much added these 3 bullet points to the existing structure, existing GitHub issue, and then created the task plan over here as well. So that's it, right? So that's what I wanted to cover in this session, right? And basically get us to the point of going from the problem, like starting off from the problem that needs to be solved, hashing it out over here, and then finally defining the work that needs to be done. Yeah. And that's it.